you believe every abandoned village in America is haunted because of ghosts, you're already looking in the wrong direction. The place you're about to hear about wasn't feared because people claimed to see monsters in the dark. It became feared because something happened there that no historian, no archaeologist, and no investigator has ever fully explained. Maps quietly erased its name. Families refused to speak about it. Even today, locals living miles away avoid mentioning the village after sunset. What makes this story different is that it isn't centered on a ghost. It's centered on a curse that may have begun long before the first European settlers ever arrived. And the strangest part? The only surviving witness didn't say the village was haunted. He said the village was still alive. October 2021. My name is Daniel Carter, and for nearly 20 years, I worked as a historical documentary photographer across the United States. My job was simple: visit forgotten places, photograph their history before nature erased them forever, and document stories that most Americans had never heard. I had explored abandoned mining camps in Montana, forgotten Civil War hospitals in Virginia, deserted farming communities across Kansas, and isolated logging settlements deep inside Oregon. Nothing prepared me for Briar Hollow. Officially, Briar Hollow doesn't exist. You won't find it marked on most modern maps. If you search old county archives, you'll occasionally discover references to a settlement established around 1798, somewhere in the Appalachian region. But the records become strangely inconsistent after the late 1800s. Entire census pages disappear. Church records stop abruptly. Property deeds reference owners who never legally existed. The village simply fades from history. I only discovered Briar Hollow after an elderly librarian in West Virginia handed me a weathered leather journal. "You like forgotten places," she said. "If you ever find this village," she paused for several seconds, "don't stay after sunset." Naturally, I assumed she was repeating another local legend. Historians hear those stories constantly. Most are exaggerations. This one wasn't. The journal belonged to Samuel Hargrove, a surveyor hired in 1894 to redraw county boundaries after severe flooding. His notes were unusually detailed. "The people smile too much. They never leave. No children cry. The church bell rings with nobody inside. I must leave before dark." Those final words were written so violently that the ink tore through several pages. No explanation followed. The remaining pages had been ripped out. Curiosity quickly became obsession. 3 weeks later, I drove toward the coordinates reconstructed from 19th century maps. Dense forest swallowed the narrow gravel road. GPS repeatedly lost signal. My phone displayed the wrong time 3 separate times. By late afternoon, I reached a rusted iron gate almost hidden beneath vines. Behind it stood dozens of abandoned wooden homes. Every building appeared nearly 200 years old, yet something felt wrong immediately. There was almost no decay. Wooden porches should have collapsed decades ago. Glass windows should have shattered. Roofs should have disappeared beneath moss. Instead, everything looked preserved, as though someone quietly maintained every building without ever living there. Absolute silence surrounded the village. No birds, no insects, no wind, only silence. The entrance sign had nearly rotted away. Only 2 words remained visible: Briar Hollow. I crossed the gate. The temperature instantly dropped. Not slightly, almost 15 degrees. Even my camera lens fogged despite the dry autumn afternoon. The first house stood open. Inside remained wooden furniture, handmade quilts, family portraits, children's toys, dishes still arranged on shelves. It looked as though the family had stepped outside for dinner and never returned. Dust covered everything, except one rocking chair. It moved gently, back and forth, back and forth. There wasn't enough wind to move a single leaf, yet the chair never stopped. I photographed everything carefully. Every image appeared perfectly normal on my camera screen. Then I entered the village church. The building was remarkably beautiful. Hand-carved pews, original stained glass, massive oak beams. An old Bible rested upon the altar. Its pages opened themselves, not dramatically, slowly, stopping at Ecclesiastes. To everything there is a season. I laughed nervously. Probably airflow, nothing supernatural. At least that's what I told myself. Then the church bell rang, one loud strike. I rushed outside. Nobody stood near the bell tower. No ropes moved, no mechanism turned, yet the vibration echoed across the empty valley. Within seconds, something impossible happened. Doors began opening, one after another, across the entire village. 30, 40, maybe 50 doors, each slowly swinging open. I couldn't see anyone, but suddenly, I no longer felt alone. That instinct humans developed after thousands of years of evolution, the feeling someone is watching. It became overwhelming. I decided to leave immediately, except the road had vanished. I walked back toward the entrance gate. Nothing, only forest. I checked my GPS, blank screen, compass spinning wildly. The sun remained frozen above the mountains. It wasn't moving. Hours passed. The sunlight never changed. Panic slowly replaced curiosity. Eventually, I found an old cemetery behind the church. Nearly every gravestone carried identical dates. Birth years varied. Death dates did not. October 14th, 1871. Every resident, every family, the exact same day. One enormous monument stood in the center. Its inscription had almost disappeared. After brushing away moss, I managed to read the words. They chose eternity over mercy. I didn't understand until I discovered the underground chapel. Hidden beneath the church floor was a narrow stone staircase. Candles still sat inside rusted holders. Ancient symbols covered the walls. Some resembled early Christian markings. Others looked far older, Native American, Celtic, unknown. In the center rested another journal. Unlike Samuel's notebook, this one remained intact. It belonged to Reverend Elias Monroe. His final entry explained everything, or perhaps nothing. According to Monroe, Briar Hollow suffered a devastating epidemic during the autumn of 1871. Children died first, then parents, then nearly everyone. Doctors refused to enter. Nearby towns burned bridges leading toward the village, fearing infection. The residents believed they had been abandoned by humanity. Desperate, village leaders sought help from an elderly woman living deep inside the mountains. Nobody knew her real name. Locals called her the Keeper. She promised salvation, but demanded one condition. No soul may ever willingly leave Briar Hollow again. The villagers accepted. That night, all church bells rang without human hands. Morning arrived. Nobody felt sick, nobody aged, no elderly resident weakened. Animals also stopped aging. Crops never spoiled. Food remained fresh indefinitely. Time itself had stopped. only inside Briar Hollow. The blessing slowly revealed itself as a curse.
Children stayed children. Old arguments never healed because memories never faded. The village couldn't grow, couldn't change, couldn't die, couldn't truly live. Eventually, several residents attempted escape. According to the journal, every person who crossed the boundary instantly aged all the years time had stolen. Some collapsed into skeletons within seconds. Others simply disappeared. The survivors dragged everyone back inside. Then they sealed the village forever. Monroe ended his journal with one haunting sentence. "We prayed for life. Instead, we escaped death." Suddenly, footsteps echoed upstairs. Real footsteps, not imagined. Slow, measured, hundreds. I extinguished my flashlight. Silence returned. Then whispers. Children laughing, women singing, men speaking quietly. The sounds surrounded me, although the chapel remained empty. I slowly climbed back toward the church. The pews were full, every seat occupied. Families dressed in 19th century clothing, perfectly still, facing the altar. None acknowledged my presence until the minister spoke. Without turning around, "You stayed after sunset." Every head turned toward me simultaneously. Every single face smiled. None blinked. I ran. The church doors slammed open before I reached them. Outside, the village was no longer abandoned. Smoke rose from chimneys, lanterns glowed, people walked streets calmly, children played, dogs barked, women swept porches. Everything appeared completely normal, except every resident occasionally stopped, turned, and smiled directly at me. No expression, only smiles. I ran blindly. Eventually, I found the rusted gate. The moment I crossed it, morning sunlight exploded across the valley. Birds returned, wind rushed through the trees. My watch displayed 8:17 a.m. The next day, I had somehow lost nearly 16 hours. Police searched the area after hearing my report. They found nothing. No village, no gate, no church, only untouched forest. My photographs? Every image showed empty woodland. No buildings, no cemetery, no houses. Only one photograph survived unchanged. The entrance sign, Briar Hollow. Investigators claimed I fabricated it. Digital experts couldn't explain why the wood appeared nearly 2 centuries old. Months later, I mailed copies of Samuel's journal and Reverend Monroe's diary to 3 universities. None ever responded. 2 packages were mysteriously returned unopened. The 3rd disappeared during shipping. A year later, I revisited the county library. The elderly librarian who first told me about Briar Hollow had passed away. Before her death, she left a sealed envelope addressed to me. Inside was one handwritten sentence. "You smiled in the last photograph." Confused, I examined the original entrance picture under magnification. Standing behind the broken sign, barely visible among the trees, was a man. He wore my jacket, held my camera, and smiled exactly the way every villager had. I have never returned, yet every October 14th, precisely at sunset, my phone receives a notification from a number that doesn't exist. There is never a message, only a single attached image. Briar Hollow, looking less abandoned every year. Some places are forgotten because history moved on. Others are forgotten because history was never allowed to leave. If Briar Hollow truly exists, perhaps its greatest curse isn't trapping the people who lived there. Perhaps it's waiting patiently for someone new to stay after sunset. For almost 2 years, I convinced myself that Briar Hollow had been nothing more than an elaborate hallucination. Sleep deprivation, isolation, the psychological effects of spending too much time exploring abandoned places. Every explanation sounded more reasonable than admitting I had walked into a village where time itself had stopped. I accepted fewer documentary assignments after that. Friends noticed I smiled less. I avoided conversations about abandoned towns. Whenever someone asked me what the strangest place I'd ever visited was, I always lied. The old mining camps in Colorado, I'd say. Never Briar Hollow, because saying its name out loud always made the room feel colder. Then on October 14th, 2023, exactly 2 years after my visit, the impossible happened again. At precisely 7:13 p.m., my phone vibrated. No caller ID, no phone number, just another photograph. This time, the image wasn't taken from outside the village. It was inside, standing in the middle of the main street. The camera angle looked exactly like mine.
But I hadn't been there. The houses looked cleaner than before. Fresh paint covered several walls. Flowers bloomed beneath windows. Smoke drifted lazily from stone chimneys. The entire village looked alive. Then I noticed something terrifying. Standing beside the church entrance was a young woman wearing a blue 19th century dress. She wasn't smiling. She looked frightened. Unlike everyone else in the picture, she was staring directly into the camera. One hand was raised, not waving, warning. I enlarged the image. Her lips formed 2 words: "Don't return." For weeks, I tried convincing myself the picture was fake, a prank, artificial intelligence, digital manipulation. Professional forensic analysts examined the file. No editing, no hidden layers, no metadata. The image technically had never been taken, yet there it was. 3 months later, I received an email from Professor Henry Wallace, a historian specializing in vanished American settlements. He had somehow obtained copies of Samuel Hargrove's journal. His message contained only one sentence: "I know where Briar Hollow is. Meet me before winter." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Professor Wallace wasn't interested in ghosts. He believed Briar Hollow represented something far stranger, a geographical anomaly, an isolated region where countless disappearances across 2 centuries pointed toward the same location. He showed me maps dating back to the 1700s. Every 30 or 40 years, a different expedition entered the forest. None produced complete records. Some investigators vanished entirely. Others returned mentally broken. Every survivor described the same detail. The villagers smiled too much. Wallace spread dozens of photographs across his desk, images from 1904. Every photograph contained the same people, the same children, the same elderly woman standing beside the church. Not one face had aged. Then he pointed toward a man standing near the back of a 1938 photograph. My blood froze. The man was me. Not someone similar. Me. Same beard, same jacket, same camera, same expression, standing quietly behind everyone else. Smiling. Impossible. The photograph had been taken more than 80 years before I was born. Wallace whispered something I'll never forget. I don't think Briar Hollow traps people after they arrive. He paused. I think it chooses them long before. I laughed. It was the only thing I could do, because if he was right, then maybe I hadn't discovered Briar Hollow. Maybe Briar Hollow had spent my entire life leading me toward it. Wallace organized a final expedition involving historians, archaeologists, geologists, and search and rescue professionals. 12 people entered the forest. Only 9 came back. The official report blamed dangerous terrain. None of the survivors would discuss what happened. Wallace resigned from his university less than a month later. He sold his home, closed every bank account, disappeared without leaving a forwarding address. Before vanishing, he mailed me a small wooden box. Inside lay an iron church key covered with rust. Attached to it was a handwritten note. When the bell rings again, lock the church. No explanation, no signature, just those words. The key still sits inside my desk drawer. Sometimes I think about throwing it into the ocean, burning it, melting it down. Yet every time I pick it up, the metal feels strangely warm, as if someone else had been holding it only moments earlier. Last October, another photograph arrived. This one contained the entire village gathered outside the church. Every resident smiled toward the camera, except one. The frightened young woman in blue stood at the back of the crowd. Again, she raised one hand. Again, she mouthed the same words, "Don't return." This time, I noticed something else. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking past the camera, at someone standing behind the photographer. I enlarged the picture until the image became blurry. Hidden in the shadows stood a tall figure wearing a black coat. Its face couldn't be seen, but one hand rested on the church bell rope. The bell wasn't ringing, not yet. Sometimes I wake around 3 in the morning, convinced I hear distant church bells carried by the wind. No churches exist anywhere near my house. Still, the sound grows a little louder every October. People often ask whether cursed places are real. After everything I've experienced, I no longer believe places become cursed. I believe some places simply remember promises that humans were never supposed to make. If Briar Hollow still waits somewhere beyond the forests of Appalachia, hidden from every modern map, then perhaps the village isn't abandoned at all. Perhaps its people are still waiting for the next traveler, waiting for another curious photographer, waiting for another historian, waiting for someone who believes every mystery deserves an answer. And if you ever find yourself driving down an unmarked mountain road where the trees suddenly become silent and an old iron gate appears from the fog, don't stop, don't read the sign, and whatever happens, if you hear a church bell after sunset, never